Imagine a world where a single airline decision sends shockwaves through an entire industry. What if that choice leads to a colossal financial crisis, affecting thousands of employees and countless families? The recent clash between the United States and China over Boeing is not just a corporate squabble, it's a titanic struggle that could redefine global trade. In an unexpected turn of events, the Chinese government has officially instructed its airlines to halt all deliveries of Boeing aircraft, triggering an avalanche of turmoil. As trade tensions escalate, Washington stands firm, insisting that China must negotiate first. This impasse has already led to a staggering 145% tariff on specific imports, igniting fears over the future of Boeing, a company that's crucial not only for the American economy but for international aviation as well. As Beijing cuts off further shipments of jets, the fallout has been swift. Boeing stock, once a beacon of stability, plummeted nearly 10% overnight. What does this mean for the number of aircraft stationed in Boeing's global order book? Approximately 4,500 jets were in play, with over 1,200 orders linked to Chinese entities, accounts for nearly 28% of Boeing's total market share. Given the steep price tag of $300 million for large aircraft and $110 million for narrow-body models, the financial implications are staggering. Boeing's financial landscape becomes even bleaker when considering their annual revenue. A critical slice, an estimated $10 to $12 billion, now hangs by a thread. Layoffs loom large, as analysts predict that if this confrontation continues, Boeing could face a revenue drop of 20 to 25%, a nightmare scenario for shareholders and a catastrophe for the workforce. The supply chain, sprawling across all 50 states, counts on that revenue to support thousands of jobs. If this situation worsens, would China pivot to Airbus, significantly altering the aviation landscape? Current tensions indicate a lasting impact, not only for Boeing but potentially for the entire U.S. economy. If lost orders from China shift to competitors, the repercussions could ripple through every aspect of trade. How long before the U.S. feels the full weight of this decision? With aviation exports factoring heavily into the national trade balance, the stakes couldn't be higher. As the clock ticks on diplomatic negotiations, the question hangs in the air: can both sides weather this storm without sinking deeper into economic turmoil? The battle lines are drawn, and only time will tell who will ultimately pay the price in this aerial chess match. Imagine the roar of jet engines piercing the night. More than 1,200 deals were tied to Chinese carriers or lessees. That's about 26 to 28% of Boeing's worldwide backlog. The typical list price hits $300 million for wide-body planes and $110 million for single-aisle narrow-body ones. Painstaking bargains have shrunk the difference between list and real prices. But listen closely, experts shout that China deals carve out 10 to 12 billion from Boeing's yearly income. Toss in extended servicing and parts. That sum swells even more. Now, with China slamming the brakes, halting every Boeing delivery, including future ones, Boeing stares down a gaping hole, 10 to 12 billion in vanished prospects. Feel the sting, like a sharp jab in the ribs. Markets recoiled instantly. Shares plunged 9 to 10% right off the bat. Why such a brutal tumble? Analysts whisper it's not just the delivery freeze. Dread of more Asian backlash looms large. And here's the real shock: could this drag on, sending Boeing's dominance to Airbus? Investors tremble at that thought. Their fears aren't unfounded. Let's dig into the figures from 2024. China pooled orders worth $14.5 billion for both giants combined. Redirect to Airbus. Ramp up local production like Comac. Boeing's slice might dwindle to 5 to 6 billion per year. The gut punch? That erosion could wipe 40 billion off Boeing's market value over time. Echoes of stock panic bounce through Wall Street's concrete canyons. Traders' frantic taps on keyboards fill the air with urgency. But wait, the fallout doesn't stop at Boeing. Oh no! It ripples into America's very core. Remember, aviation shipments are a lifeline against the trade deficit scare. Official stats tell a tale: 130 to 140 billion in yearly U.S. exports of civil aircraft and gear. A huge chunk? Boeing's passenger jets. Plus spares and upkeep. China reels in 15 to 18% of that pie. Lose just 15 to 18% from one sector. billions vanish from the export ledger, boom, just like that. Will this push the US to the brink? Shocks and reverberations continue. Markets reel, but deeper tremors threaten to crack open unseen crises. What if China's retaliation multiplies? Could Boeing's empire truly crumble overnight? As trade tensions escalate, the aviation sector finds itself at ground zero. The U.S. export of civil aviation equipment and aircraft is valued at around $130 to $140 billion annually. Boeing dominates this market, with more than 15% of exports directed to China. Just imagine losing even a slice of that market could devastate the U.S. export balance. The consequences ripple through America. Boeing's supply chain is spread across nearly every state, think engine parts, avionics, seats, landing gear, and thousands of small businesses relying on these contracts. What if this colossal network halts? Estimates suggest that by the end of 2025, engine parts manufacturers could lay off between 5,000 to 10,000 workers. The ticking clock brings urgency, and the stakes have never been higher. On the flip side, replacing Boeing is no picnic for China. Although Beijing aims to bolster ties with Airbus and expedite projects like the C919 and CR929 from local manufacturer Comac, the reality is daunting. Chinese airlines heavily depend on models like the Boeing 777, 787, and 737 MAX for long-haul flights. Transitioning to Airbus jets isn't simply swapping planes, it demands extensive pilot training and maintenance infrastructure, racking up millions in transition costs over several months. This trade war feels like a high-stakes chess game, leaving both players to ponder the real cost of their moves. China knows that a retaliatory step will spark disruptions on its side as well. The haunting question remains, how much longer can both nations endure this costly standoff? As we delve deeper into this conflict, recent changes in tariffs reveal a fierce battlefield. The U.S. has slapped tariffs ranging from 25% to 50% on select technology and industrial products from China, while threatening over 100% on some strategic items. In retaliation, China has countered by imposing restrictions on agricultural imports and energy resources from the U.S. The situation grows murkier, as civil aviation faces yet another wave of challenges. As we approach a pivotal moment in this unfolding drama, would a shift in alliances lead to an unexpected twist, or will it plunge both nations into deeper chaos? The globe watches, holding its breath. In the deepening trade conflict, the United States has slapped hefty tariffs on Chinese goods, up to 50% on tech and industrial items, with threats of over 100% on key strategic ones. China has hit back, blocking U.S. agricultural and energy imports, and now halting all deliveries of Boeing planes. This isn't just about money, it's a power struggle shaking global aviation to its core, leaving Boeing's shares crashing and jobs at risk. Have you ever wondered how one presidential tweet could wipe billions off a company's value overnight? Imagine the roar of jet engines silencing mid-flight, the cold steel of undelivered fuselages gathering dust in warehouses. China's counterstrike feels like a sharpened blade, carving into American wallets. They've slapped restrictions on U.S. agricultural products, the sweet, earthy smell of cornfields turning to ashes in export dreams. Energy resources from the U.S., there are too, the hum of oil rigs from Texas now a distant memory for Chinese buyers. And now, short-range commercial airplanes join the list. In a shocking twist, they've decided to stop all civilian passenger aircraft from flowing in. Picture the deafening silence in Boeing's boardroom as engines sputter to a halt. Previous Boeing deals with China? They totaled a staggering $150 to $160 billion in potential value. If this massive slice shifts to Airbus or other makers, Boeing stares at a long-term revenue black hole. The stock market volatility hit hard, $15 to $20 billion evaporated from the company's market value in just 1 week. Could a 737 MAX scandal from the pandemic, which already bled over $20 billion, pale against this fresh wound? Analysts paint a grim picture. If China holds this line for 6 to 12 months, Boeing's delivery revenue could plunge by 20 to 25%. The company employs about 140,000 people, with 30,000 dedicated to commercial airplanes. Every 1% drop in profit margins threatens thousands of jobs, the rough calluses on machinists' hands suddenly idle, the crisp snap of assembly lines falling silent. Economic protectionism rings like a boomerang swinging back. Could it smash U.S. workers too? In press statements, President Trump pointed fingers at Beijing, claiming China ditched the Boeing deal and hurt America with unfair tariffs and currency tricks. The White House shows no signs of retreat. But trade experts whisper warnings. Will U.S.-China aviation ties fracture forever, leaving craters and alliances? Rumors swirl that Airbus might announce new deals with China at an April press conference. If they land a 150-unit order, Boeing loses most of its market slice. Executives call it their worst-case nightmare. Sensory details intensify the dread, the metallic tang of unfinished aircraft in hangars, the distant echo of factory horns no longer blowing. In a sudden twist, transformers on a power grid near a Boeing plant sparked earlier, symbolizing broader risks to infrastructure. What's next? Will sealing these aviation cracks unravel more? The trade war looms larger, with Washington's tariffs slashing deep, and Beijing's blockade tightening. Shareholders feel the heat, employees brace for cuts, and economies teetered. Will President Trump flip the script, or is this the calm before a global storm sweeps millions from prosperity? The air hums with uncertainty, the weight of undelivered dreams pressing down, and that's just the beginning. Previously, we saw how Boeing's hold on the Chinese aviation market is at a breaking point. Rumors swirl that Airbus might swoop in with a massive order, 150 planes that could crush Boeing's share entirely. Boeing leaders call this their darkest nightmare. Now, imagine this: over the last 5 years, Boeing has sold more than $50 billion worth of jets to China alone. Picture the hum of production lines, the smell of fresh paint, the gleaming metal wings stretching across hangars. Chinese airlines are planning to buy over 500 new aircraft during the next decade, with Boeing deeply entwined in most negotiations. Each plane ordered means hundreds of millions in revenue, up to $500 million once maintenance and spare parts are counted. But what if this entire pipeline suddenly shuts down? Hundreds of aircraft orders vanish, replaced only by promises from Airbus or the Russian-Chinese CR-929 project. Yet, those alternatives aren't easy fixes. They can't ramp up production overnight or fully replace Boeing's established dominance. Analysts say China's move is a daring message. They're willing to endure short-term pains just to challenge Boeing's long-term dominance. Boeing, however, sees this as raw political retaliation. Lobbyists warn lawmakers that this trade war will haunt the company not just for the next decade, but for the next 30 years. Worse still, it might slam the door on the Chinese market forever. On Capitol Hill, some voices urge easing tariffs to protect Boeing. But the Trump administration's stance remains firm: no compromises. The company now bears the heavy cost of this high-stakes political battle. According to official records, Boeing's revenue from aircraft deliveries to China hit $7.4 billion in 2024. By 2025, the projection was to soar to $9 to $10 billion. But after the recent turmoil, experts warn those forecasts could plummet to near zero. The ramifications reach far beyond aviation. If Beijing extends bans or introduces delays in other critical sectors, the entire trade landscape is at risk. This crisis is no longer just about planes. It's about billions in goods, thousands of jobs, and fragile global supply chains teetering on the edge. How far will this ripple effect go? Will the trade war spiral into a full-blown economic storm? The next move could reshape the future for both giants and the world watching closely. As the relentless waves of the trade war crash against the shores of international business, a monumental clash looms between the United States and China, this time centered around aviation. The question echoes ominously: what happens when a titan like Boeing finds itself trapped in the crossfire of escalating tariffs and retaliatory bans? In a shocking turn of events, the Chinese government has ordered its airlines to cease all deliveries from Boeing. This order casts a dark shadow over the aviation giant, jeopardizing an astounding $150 billion in potential revenue from aircraft and up to $200 billion in spare parts and maintenance contracts. This isn't just about planes. This war threatens the very fabric of trade relations, with repercussions that could ripple through thousands of companies and millions of families reliant on Boeing's ecosystem. With the U.S. slapping hefty tariffs of up to 145% on Chinese products and Beijing responding by halting airplane deliveries, the stakes couldn't be higher. It's a duel that could lead to considerable job losses in the U.S., particularly in sectors linked to aircraft manufacturing. Imagine the silence that would replace the hum of engines in factories and unforgiving reality for thousands facing uncertainty. How long before these retaliations escalate into a full-blown trade war, triggering a recession? Boeing is already feeling the weight of these tumultuous times, witnessing a staggering 9 to 10% drop in share prices immediately after the announcement. If China ramps up its actions against other sectors, such as agricultural and technology imports, the fallout could drastically increase, sending investor confidence spiraling. Reports indicate that if this tension continues, the job market will buckle under the pressure, affecting many lives. And as if things couldn't get more complicated, European competitor Airbus is poised to pounce on any opening. The whispers of an imminent deal with China could deliver an even more crushing blow to Boeing, as investors speculate a shift in market dominance. Isn't it unsettling that a single geopolitical move could redefine the landscape of commercial aviation? The future hangs in the balance. For now, the Boeing crisis serves as an alarming symbol of what can happen in the realm of trade tensions. The multi-billion-dollar question remains, will the US relent, or will they continue down this path, risking further devastation? Time will unveil the answers, but the stakes grow ever higher as both economies brace for the next move in this intricate game of power and commerce. Imagine the thunderous roar of jet engines suddenly silenced across the Pacific skies. The scent of kerosene fuel hangs heavy in the air as massive Boeing planes gather dust on tarmacs. Is China's ruthless halt on Boeing deliveries a wake-up call that could obliterate America's aviation giant and maybe the whole trade war? This shocking move arrives as U.S. tariffs squeeze China, sparking a chain reaction of economic devastation. Suppliers scramble to rework contracts. 364 characters, with tensions erupting like a storm over the globe, China's bold retaliation sends waves of panic through Boeing headquarters. The company's stock tumbles 9 to 10% in mere days. Imagine the frantic buzz of trading floors, investors' hearts pounding as screens flash red. Why is this battleground shifting to the heavens? Analysts whisper that delays in deliveries threaten to erase $10 to $12 billion from Boeing's annual profits. This isn't just revenue vanishing, it's the potential erosion of long-term alliances forged over years. The air feels electric with uncertainty. But what hidden twist could turn the tables? In the shadow of that stock plunge, a deeper crisis unfolds across America's heartland. Boeing's order book once boasted around 4,500 aircraft worldwide. Over 1,200 of those deals, nearly 26 to 28%, linked back to Chinese carriers or leasing firms. Each plane, valued at up to $300 million for wide bodies alone, represents billions in promised sales. Now, with China's Civil Aviation Authority enforcing a strict hiatus, those contracts hang by a thread. Feel the chill of fear gripping thousands of workers, their livelihoods tied to assembly lines humming at full pace. How will this ripple affect jobs, families, and entire states? Supply chains stretch like fragile veins, connecting engine makers, seat producers, and avionics experts from coast to coast. Could up to 10,000 roles vanish in engine parts factories by 2025? The tactile grip of worry tightens as livelihoods crumble. Building on that precarious web of global supply woes, the blowback hits the U.S. economy like a sudden crosswind. Aviation exports, a lifeline against trade deficits, total $130 to $140 billion yearly. China's 15 to 18% slice of that market now threatens to crumble, dragging down America's balance sheets. Traders sense the metallic tang of losses, markets quivering with each report. Yet, China's airlines face their own gauntlet. Replacing Boeing's workhorses, the soaring 777, 787, and 737 MAX demands retraining pilots, overhauling maintenance hubs, and stockpiling spares. The faint hum of transition echoes through airports, costing millions extra. Is this a calculated gamble, where China endures short-term turbulence to inflict greater harm on U.S. foes? Airbus looms larger, whispering promises of future gains. Amid this aviation standoff, rumors swirl of steeper repercussions, tariffs climbing to 145% on Chinese goods, destined to echo in Boeing's bottom line. Previous pacts with Chinese buyers, potentially worth $50 billion over 5 years, teeter on collapse. Stock volatility erases $15 to $20 billion from Boeing's value in a week alone. Overlay this with pandemic turmoil from the 737 MAX mishaps, already $20 billion in losses, and the strain pulses through 140,000 employees, 30,000 dedicated to passenger jets. 1% profit dips could sever thousands of jobs. President Trump's barbs ring out, blaming Beijing for abandoning talks and wielding unfair tactics. But analysts warn, if this drags on 6 to 12 months, deliveries might plummet 20 to 25%. Picture the unexpected shift: aircraft orders slated for 2025, promising $9 to $10 billion, could evaporate to zero. What if Airbus seizes the void with 150 more deals, snatching market dominance? Boeing insiders call it their nightmare. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, as broader trade retaliation brews. Drawing from that looming Airbus encroachment, the chessboard expands to undefendable frontiers. Beijing's defiance signals more than sales halts; it targets strategic sectors like farming and tech. If responded in kind, a full-scale conflict could shrink exports and kindle global recession fears. Investors hover on a knife's edge, hope for quick deals, or dread cascading sanctions. Civil aviation morphs into a political arsenal, with domestic makers like Comac gaining sheen. But Comac's offerings, such as the C919, struggle for total output. Airlines endure disruptions, pilots bumping over rough terrains without familiar controls. The acrid smoke of rivalry rises. So, is this protectionism a self-defeating vortex, ensnaring U.S. firms in nationalist crossfire? Boeing's pleas to Congress highlight epical damage, potentially barring re-entry into China for decades. Against this backdrop of diplomatic deadlock, forecasts tease fragile peace covenants. Will Washington relent, retreating from tariff walls to preserve aviation ties? Or will Beijing escalate, choking U.S. imports further? Boeing stands as an emblem of fractured Sino-American bonds, its fate entwined with billion-dollar deals and untold futures. Experts predict a summit might salvage sectors, yet absent compromise, woes deepen. Imagine the sensory rush of negotiation tables, hands clenching, voices rising as executives weigh compromises. Millions of families watch, breaths held. How long before this odyssey resolves, or spirals into irrevocable chaos? One wrong move could shatter economies, leaving skies empty and pockets drier worldwide. Control 250. In the escalating trade conflict between the United States and China, Boeing stands at the epicenter, threatened by a severe blow to its finances and future. With annual revenues from China hovering around $10 to $12 billion, and long-term deals worth a staggering $150 billion hanging in the balance, the stakes have never been higher. The potential for a catastrophic stock market fallout, exceeding $50 billion, looms ominously over the aerospace giant. As tensions mount, the ripple effects might extend far beyond civil aviation. The possibility of retaliatory measures targeting other vital sectors adds to the uncertainty. A fresh front has opened in this tumultuous trade war, and the Boeing incident serves as a stark reminder of its unpredictable nature. Neither side appears willing to yield, with Beijing seemingly resolved to wield its leverage. "We're playing our best card against these tariffs," officials assert defiantly. Meanwhile, the Trump administration's stance remains steadfast: China abandoned the Boeing deal. We shall not compromise. Will a diplomatic breakthrough emerge tomorrow, allowing for special exceptions for Boeing? Without significant mutual concessions, hopes for resolution seem faint. Both nations must arrive at a point where retreat is unthinkable. Until then, companies and workers are left in precarious uncertainty, their fates intertwined with the volatile dynamics of two of the world's largest economies. With potential contracts worth $150 billion for Boeing at risk of dissolution. The current showdown represents an unprecedented deployment of economic might in the aviation sector. As both nations engage in what can be considered diplomatic warfare, each decision taken could deepen the crisis further. What shocking moves might unfold next? As businesses brace for the unexpected, the repercussions of this battle in the air continue to reverberate globally.